The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated. Reproduction or dissemination, other than for the purpose of education or information without the express written permission of the Phoenix Research Institute or Nova Society Media, is strictly prohibited. I'd like to welcome everyone back to the Nova Society, and today we'll be doing something a little bit different. While we were waiting for a guest to show up, we actually just had a simple conversation between Brooklynn, Scott, and myself, and Brooklynn had some questions, and Scott and I just engaged in the conversation and had a pretty good time. So, let's listen in.
Did you ask Dieter what he thought of the...
Dieter and I had a very interesting conversation yesterday after we got done doing it, because, of course, after we get done doing anything, it's time for a Prost. We have to have a beer.
Right.
And he wanted to know this thing about the Gulf of America.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, yeah, it's kind of silly, isn't it? And he goes, it's really silly.
Mm-hmm.
And usually Dieter's pretty pro-Trump. But he said, yeah, he goes, that's just like really silliness. So I said, well, that's what you wanted, even though you couldn't vote for it. That's what you wanted. Anyway.
What did he say about the salute?
He, his comment was it wouldn't have gone over well in Germany, but Germans are very aware of that. And
Mm-hmm.
he said, somebody from South Africa, somebody from the United States may not be as much. I mean, Germans are extremely aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, our hand positionings are, we were careful. And I said, yeah, maybe, or whatever.
Yeah,
all right,
but Musk supports the far right German party.
Yeah.
So yeah, and
they won't do that.
No, I know, but I did some watching, not enough, but as much as I had time for of documentaries to see if there were other hand positions. And while I didn't see anyone putting a hand on a heart, I did see Joseph Goebbels with his arm out to the right of his body. Everybody else had the arm directly in front of the body. Goebbels had his out stretched to his right. So it was offset. And also both Goebbels and Hitler would bend their elbow and bend their wrist back like this.
Yeah.
And everybody else.
What I used to call the limp wrist, Nazi salute.
Exactly.
Anyway, yeah.
They wouldn't, everybody else would be stiff arm, but they would have this. So I think that this and a that, the way Musk did, is not at all out of keeping with a potential variation on a Nazi salute. So I do think very much that is what he was doing.
And, I know Scott kind of at the last thing said, yeah, he thought so too. Me, I mean, again, I don't know what he was thinking. I have no idea.
Don't know.
You do know what he was thinking because he said it. He said, my heart goes out to you. Thank you for saving civilization, which is a real Nazi thing to say.
Well, Dr. Ruth Ben-Ghiat said that is a Nazi salute.
Well, there we have it.
According to Ruth Ben-Ghiat, absolutely, it's unequivocal.
And then he went a couple of days later and spoke at the AFD meeting via a video link.
Mm-hmm.
And has said that the AFD is the only way to save Germany. I mean, this is all just Nazi stuff,
Yes, it is.
So why do we have to go through these things where we see what we see? It's clear, and yet people are like, well, it's so ambiguous, we can't really tell what it is. I don't get it. We saw that with Trump also with the fine people on both sides thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's no fine people on both sides. There's only fine people on the sides of people who are nice to other people, not the sides where they're marching with torches and yelling, Jews will not replace us. That's not fine people. And you find yourself on the side with those people, move to the other side, Yeah. It's simple enough. Like, I have no problem letting people know that I don't like Nazis. I don't know why these guys can't do that. It just doesn't seem plausible to me, unless they want to be, somehow ambiguous about it. So to leave it open if they need the Nazis later, which Trump did, and he got them. They attacked the Capitol, and now they're all free.
Well, Trump was also saying American Reich and that type of thing, and that's pretty obvious. And plus, as the communicator and as the person in the leadership position, it is that person's responsibility to be clear what the person is communicating. And if there's any way to be that the communication is going to be ambiguous, you don't do it. Or you clarify specifically afterward.
My comment is that if you look at history, politicians have never been the greatest communicators. And they've had to backtrack so many times on something either they said or something they did, or look at poor Obama wore a tan suit and they almost lost their bloody ass minds over this.
Right. The one called the great communicator, right?
Right.
Ronald Reagan had to go on and go, I said that we weren't supporting Iraq and weren't providing weapons to the Contras. Well, apparently I was in my heart I believe that's true, but apparently it isn't true, which is like a really weird thing to say.
So, I think that a lot of times, we focus so much on that kind of thing. Remember when it used to be called flip-flopping? Yeah. If you made the decision and then 10 years later you had a different view, it was called flip-flopping. Now, I always called it, you learn something to change your mind, which is what we're supposed to do. Your idea evolved. And that's what it's supposed to be. I mean, I don't know. I kind of think that's kind of the way it's supposed to go.
It's so long ago I can't remember, but I'm sure we discussed this when we were talking about Kamala Harris, who was asked the same question every single time she was interviewed. How come you changed your position on fracking? And it's really important to the people of Pennsylvania. And instead of having an answer, which would have been a good answer, to say like, well, the world is a different place now than it was, and they need our fracking around the world, and we're providing it, and it's a great alternative to Arab oil or Russian oil or whatever. That's a simple enough answer, and instead she couldn't clarify enough so that she wasn't asked the question again and again and again. And it's one of the reasons I think she lost, was because she was unable to stop that same question from being asked over and over and over again. And but Trump does it strategically. Trump's idea is, I'm going to say everything, and that way when you try to pin me down, I could say, no, I said, march there peacefully. But you also said you got to fight. Those two things don't actually work together. You can't say you got to fight for your country and let's do it peacefully, because those are contradictory. And he gets to pull out whichever one seems to work for him at the moment. And he's always done stuff like that. Whenever he's been cheating people out of their money, he's used ambiguity as one of his tactics.
Right.
Well, and the other thing with these pardons is that look at the timing of the pardons. Normally, those are at the end of the presidential time frame, not at the beginning.
Well, but he's keeping a campaign promise. I mean, that really is a campaign promise. So. Yeah,
but he could still do that at the end, not at the beginning. He doesn't have to let people.
Yeah, but that's 4 years. I mean, and he's going to have people saying, "Hey, you said you were going to let him out. Wait 4 years." I mean, he hasn't done anything that's like normal to what would normally be done. So, I mean, I'm not surprised by that. That's for sure.
Yes, but then do you think that sorry, I know I interrupted you. Then do you think, because just previously to that, J.D. Vance, I so want to call him J.P. Mandel, but his name now is J.D. Vance, and Mike Johnson had both said, oh, no, we're not going to let criminal violent people back out. Those people are not going to be let out or whatever. And whether they both knowingly made that statement and they lied, or whether they genuinely believed that was not going to happen, and then Trump went ahead and let them out anyway. Do you think that they lied, or do you think?
No, I truly think that that was to them expected. I mean, the biggest problem with the Republicans, and I think Lindsey Graham was the first one to really fall into it. He started kissing the butt and kissing the ring in hopes that he could control, that he could have some sort of control over him. And I think Vance and I think Johnson and I think a lot of the Republicans that follow in basically say, well, I think I can get some control, and I can put Susan Collins. Well, he's learned something by this.
But he hasn't.
No, he hasn't. Yeah, I mean, it's wishful thinking on their part. They're expecting rational logic from somebody that has no rationality or logic, and there's where the problem is. I mean,
Pam
really all there is.
Pam Bondi, who's going to be the attorney general, said, "Yeah, we're going to take it on a case by case basis." And then Trump looked at it and said, "Yeah, it's a lot of trouble looking at it as a case. Let's just do them all, and we'll do them all. And we're gonna let people who brought weapons there, fired off weapons there, who beat people, who used an American flag with a baseball bat and beat a cop. We're gonna let them all go, and we'll sort it out later." Yeah. Which has been happening because one of them is dead now, getting shot by the police, and a couple of them have just been rearrested.
I want to ask a question. Is there, before we get into the rest of today and our listener questions, my question is it true that, and yeah, I have a bunch of questions actually. Is it true that undocumented immigrants are shooting Americans now and taking over their houses because they're so scared? That's one of my questions. And the other thing is, do you know why or what caused Colombia to change their minds and take immigrants after rejecting them and making a big thing out of it? Because I was disappointed.
We take the second question first.
Please, because I've been dying to know what happened.
Yeah, and there's different versions of what happened.
That's fine. Right? I want to know all of them.
The White House says that he capitulated, and he said, "You know what? I have a jet. I'm going to send my jet and put them on my jet, and I'm going to bring them home, not in handcuffs, not in a military airplane." The thing is that there seems to be a belief on the part of the right wing of this country that nobody has ever sent undocumented immigrants back who didn't qualify for asylum back to Colombia before. And that is just not true. People have to, get past the garbage talk that the Trump administration puts out all the time, constantly, and understand that last year alone, there were 124 ICE flights to Colombia carrying repatriated citizens, Colombian citizens, who didn't qualify for asylum in the USA. Over the 4 years of the Biden administration, there were something like 475 of those flights. It was fifth on the list of flights that went from the U.S. to Central American, or I don't know if it's North or Central American countries behind Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, and El Salvador. So Colombia has been accepting their citizens back who have come here, not qualified for asylum, not been able to establish themselves in any kind of citizenship in any way, and got sent back there. It was done quietly. It was done without threats, without putting people in handcuffs. It was done with dignity, and it was no big deal. It happened all the time. It goes on constantly. They were put on chartered airplanes and sent home. When you send a military airplane to a foreign country, that foreign country has to decide, do I want their military coming to my country? And in most cases, the answer is no. And that's what the difference was. He had to use a military airliner because he wanted that picture of them being loaded onto what's the name of the plane, C-130 or whatever it is, these big military transport airplanes. And that's why he did it. It costs so much more money to use a military plane than it did to just charter a plane and put them on there. There weren't that many people that they sent back that they couldn't just charter an airplane. But Trump likes to make a big splash, likes to draw attention to everything that he does. And here's the craziest part about it. Has he pushed Colombia away from the United States towards other countries? Has he served notice to them by doing this, by this action alone? Has he served notice to them that they are on the list of countries that we're not really too sure about? They're one of the few countries that we have a trade surplus with. We export more to them than we import from them. So you would think that Trump would be a big pro-Colombian guy. but he's not, because they don't want our military aircraft flying over their airspace and into their airports. And it's just like if we lose Colombia to China, you can trace it back to this, because they're right now they're going, you know what, we need alternatives to this stuff. So we better start looking around for other vendors to sell us what we need. It is just a crazy thing to do, self-destructive thing to do, and just so typical.
Scott's right in the fact that it's optics. For Trump, it was nothing more than optics. I would have been, the fact that Colombia took these people back, as Scott says again, is true. I mean, this has happened before. This isn't anything like new. The only difference is, they're going to try to make front page hay out of this. It truly is nothing new. And those people, we have to truly remember that those people coming from Colombia seeking asylum are probably not seeking asylum from the government. They're probably seeking asylum because of the drug cartels. I mean, there's a different dynamic. I would have been more surprised if the leader of Venezuela capitulated and said, yeah, sure, come on. And that's what they're going to frame this as, a capitulation by the government of Colombia, which it is not. It is not. They have done this for so long, and as Scott says, they did it with dignity. They did it quietly. They repatriated their citizens. That's the way it's supposed to work. But I really don't see. I don't think that whatever you're hearing out of the Trump camp as to why this happened is probably just more bluster and just more red meat for the base. Oh, look what he's doing. Oh yeah, he's kicked out what? I can't even remember how many there were on that plane. Like 50.
I have that number. It's 80. There were 80 of them.
Yeah, 80. And and as Scott said too, you're going to bring in a military plane to do this at a ridiculously high cost.
No, I have that number too. You want to hear it?
Sure, give it to me.
Listen to this. How insane. Okay.
Oh God.
So listen, a C-17. So there were two C-17s and two C-130s that were used for these migrant repatriation flights. Okay.
For 80 people.
For 80 people. This was DOD estimate.
Okay.
A single flight involving a C-17 cost $252,000 to transport 80 people from El Paso to Guatemala City. Okay, it was a different flight than this one. If you use a C-130 for the same 12-hour flight, it could be $800,000 to about $850,000.
Good God.
A regular DHS chartered flight costs $8,500 per trip. So it's I believe that's 10 times.
Yeah.
10 times more to use a C-130 for this flight than it is to just charter a flight and put them on 80 people on an airplane and send them back home. You have to give them peanuts or whatever it is. Maybe that adds a little to the cost. But it's a ridiculous thing. But here's the deal. I didn't know until I looked it up, until I had to go track down the information. And the Biden people were very quiet about how they deported people. They didn't make a big deal about it. And maybe that's the undoing of the Biden people, right? I mean, maybe if he had made a bigger deal about it and got up there like Mussolini, stuck his jaw out and said, we are sending them back to the countries that they came from. We don't want them here, and made a big deal about it and used military flights for no particular reason, maybe that would have got him reelected, and people wouldn't have thought he's so weak, because there are going to be people out there who obviously are not going to be listening to us, and they're going to think, hey, nobody has ever sent Colombians back to Colombia before Trump did it, and he did it with the military, man. He is a powerful guy. He's a strong man, a strong leader, and that's what we need in this country. It's just crazy stuff. Crazy stuff.
It is.
And here's another, sending 1,500 active duty troops to the border.
Yes.
And then I looked up what the makeup of those troops are. Most of them are military police, right, with experience in policing. So good. Okay, I guess that makes sense. And a bunch of other ones they sent the Marines, and they're like, hey, we're sending in the Marines. They didn't send in Marine fighters. They sent in Marines, logistics people, and engineers to help rebuild some of the barriers that have been, damaged, or attrition, or whatever it is that damages barriers. So they sent the 1st Combat Engineer Battalion of the 1st Marine Division and the 7th Engineer Support Battalion of the 1st Marine Logistics Group both out of Camp Pendleton, California. If you look at the others that they sent over to the border, these are not, military fighters. They are military police. We have a combat engineer company of armored. So I guess they've got Humvees and things like that. More like that. I'm sure they're not bringing tanks with them.
Right.
And basically it's more than 3/4 of them. I would say 7/8 of them are police, military police, and the rest of them are engineers.
Right.
So, everybody's got this picture in their head when he says, I'm sending the military to the border, that we've got, guys like lined up with rifles aimed across the river. That is not the case. So it's all, as you said, Mark, it's all optics. It's all just show. It's all theater. And it's bread and circuses stuff without the bread. We don't have the bread, but we got the circuses, man. We got lots and lots of circuses.
The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Apple iTunes, the largest source of podcasts and music on the internet, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your source for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. We'd also like to thank all of our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a question or a comment, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So for Dr. Brooklynn and Weldon, Dr. Priscilla Hobbs, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and all of us here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power in society is knowledge. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next time.
Hi, everyone. This is JJ, the co-founder of Good Pods. If you haven't heard of it yet, Good Pods is like Goodreads or Instagram, but for podcasts. It's new, it's social, it's different, and it's growing really fast. There are more than 2 million podcasts, and we know that it is impossible to figure out what to listen to. On Good Pods, you follow your friends and podcasters to see what they like. That is the #1 way to discover new shows and episodes. You can find Good Pods on the web or download the app. Happy listening!